I went to Michigan for undergrad. I started in 1967 and I finished in 1971. And I had a bachelor's in economics. And I had a teaching certificate as a minor. And then I went on to law school at Wayne State University. I started in 1971 and I finished in 1974.
I started at Berkeley High, where I graduated in the class of '62. So I was living in North Oakland County since '59. And from there I went to Michigan State for 3 years. I came home my junior year and went to Wayne. I also got a degree in economics. And I like labor economics, labor side labor economics. Michigan State and Wayne had programs in that. And that's what I enjoyed studying. And I went to Wayne State in '66 and graduated in '69.
And I did not really care for labor economics to any great degree, but I did care for political systems, the economics of political systems, capitalism, socialism, etc. And the way it worked for me was that you would decide what law schools you were going to apply to after undergrad, and you would apply to them, and then you'd take the LSAT, and the LSAT would be sent to those schools you applied to, and the LSAT and the schools would then look at your grades, and they'd look at the LSAT just like how they look at the SAT now for undergrad, and they would decide whether or not they were going to accept you. And then after you're done with law school, assuming as long as you have a degree, then you're eligible to take the bar exam, sit for the bar exam of your state. Generally, most people, after they finish law school, they take a bar review course of some kind or other. It's a private, number of private companies offer it. And you take that bar review course and you immerse yourself in the state law of the state that you're studying for. And then you take the bar course, the bar exam, and I believe a part of the bar exam is called a multi-state exam. It's the same for everybody in all states. And part of the exam is a state exam where they ask you state questions, and that's usually the multi-state is usually a multiple choice question, multiple choice exam, and the state part is usually essay.
Okay.
Law school, I think law school teaches you a way of thinking, a thinking process, and a writing process as much as anything. Because if you look at what you learn in law school, I don't think I learned anything in law school in the way of substantive law. I learned very little in the way of substantive law 30 years ago or more that I'm using now. But it teaches you a way to approach a problem, a way to think about a problem, a way to solve a problem. Do you agree?
Absolutely. And that way, we've done it over and over and over again in our lives. Your first job is to find the issue.
Yeah.
When people come to you with a problem, whether it's a tax problem or whether it's a tort civil action problem that I do, you have to understand the issues that they're presenting and then do the analysis of the issues and come up with a rational approach to fit their needs and to fit your skill set and your understanding of their issues. And that issue finding, problem solving is way the best thing law school can teach people. And it's certainly is always helpful and ongoing in all parts of my life.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
I'm with the same company I started with in 1967. I started as a law clerk, and now I'm the president of the company. And we're a law firm that represents the Democratic Party, the UAW. We do a lot of political and civil rights work in the state. We also do a lot of litigation. Products liability litigation is what I specialized in. So I interviewed there with a man called Ted Sachs, who was the preeminent labor side labor lawyer of the state. And I was his law clerk for 2 years. And then worked as a labor side labor lawyer representing unions and pension funds and health and welfare funds. And then got involved with Nader's Raiders, Ralph Nader and some of his people, and got involved in automotive crashworthy litigation. And then started a department that had to do with defective products and toxic materials, mostly on the job. 95% of defective products liability cases arise on the job, and then grew that department into a litigation department. So I've always been at the same place, which is very rare. I teach part-time at Wayne State, and from our statistics, the average lawyer changes jobs 4 or 5 times during his career. So I'm very rare with regard to those considerations.
Now you're going to hear from the average lawyer.
Ah,
I started at I clerked in law school for a small firm, and once I got out of law school, I interviewed with the United States Department of Labor Office of the Solicitor, which is the legal arm for the Department of Labor, and they offered me a job in their Detroit office, which no longer exists. And what the Office of the Solicitor does is it enforces in court the laws that the Department of Labor is charged to enforce. So a lot of my job was enforcing minimum wage and overtime laws and OSHA, age discrimination, a more obscure law called the Farm Labor Contractors Registration Act, and some other laws. And I stayed there for 2 years and had fun at it. We were located the first 2 years in a small building in downtown Detroit, and then we got moved to the actual federal courthouse, and it was fun to work in the courthouse. And I was there for 4 years, and then I went off and started my own firm with a friend, and stayed with him. We were in Southfield, and we were together for I think 3 or 4 years. And then a small law firm offered me a job, and I went off and worked for that firm. And it was there that I was sent to a class, a 2-week class on appraisal theory, property appraisal theory. And after I took that class, I started doing work at the Michigan Tax Tribunal for property tax appeals, representing communities and school districts when property is appealed, commercial or industrial property. It goes to the Michigan Tax Tribunal in Michigan, and the communities that are charged with defending the assessment have to defend it at the tribunal. And I represented a number of communities, and I did that for a few years, and then I went off, started my own firm, and I eventually did primarily that. So from 1982 until now, my practice has grown more and more in the field of property tax appeals, and I represent a number of communities now at the tax tribunal, and that's virtually all I do now. A good lawyer, well, that's like a 2-part question. If you mean by a good lawyer somebody who's successful and has a lot of business, that's one question. Or if you mean somebody who's good in court, because that's the second question. Somebody can be good in court and not have a lot of business because he's not likable or she's not likable. So it's a combination of being successful at what you do at law and being liked by people who want to use you. And those two things work hand in hand. And the legal part, a lot of law, the practice of law, not the business of law, but the practice of law has a lot to do with detail work. You've got to get the details right. Even though Barry's in court and I'm sure he does a great job in court. But, and that's part of his personality. He does things I can't do in court. But I'm sure that he's very careful with his details because that makes him successful too.
If the question is what makes you successful in law, we already talked about the business part of it. That underlies everything. Law is, and I was just talking to my son-in-law who's in Wall Street, and in order to be successful in anything, you've got to be able to generate clients. And usually clients come from other satisfied people who you've represented or other sources of business that want you to handle their problems because you become specialized. If I had a tax problem on property, I couldn't do it. I wouldn't want to do it. I wouldn't know how to do it. It's beyond my skill set. So I'd pick Nevin. Now, if Nevin has a good reputation, he certainly, and he does, he'd be a person who is out there knowing. If I talk to other lawyers and say, where should I go for this tax appeal problem, his name would come up. I'd call him up and he'd represent me. So getting business and having a reputation in the community to get business is very important. And then, like Nevin said, for 26 years or 20 or almost 30 years, I averaged more than 25 weeks a year in court. In order for me to do that, and I'm not that particularly good on detail, but I'm particularly good at understanding that I needed George Fishback, my partner, who is phenomenally good on detail, on writing, on briefing, on the types of paperwork and background that you need in order to keep somebody in litigation. So he became my partner. In order to keep him as a partner, you have to, in order to keep him employed, you have to make him a partner. Not that he doesn't deserve to, but you have to recognize his talent skill. So if you want to keep a medium-sized business or even a small business going, you've got to find good people, recognize their skill set, and use them in a way that they can best fit into your practice or into the group practice. And I really think, as a person who's had to hire a number of people in my life to make the company survive, all the business changes that companies have to go through, our company's been around since 1923. And in order to keep something like that going for 80 years, you've got to be able to change with the times and go with the areas of practice that are popular then and remunerative then. And that's what the type of people I look to hire. People that are flexible, people that are bright, people that can make the changes and deal with the changes in the law, because the law does change.